All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Before we get started, I just want to say that I took my second shot just recently, and I have been very tired, sleepy, and kind of really hurting. So if you hear me like grunt and groan or kind of like yawn, please forgive me. It's the shot, okay? Um, but today we're going to be talking about the weapons and the improvement of weapons and the invention of certain weapons that were introduced in World War One. And then we're going to be talking about the end of World War One. Okay. Now here's the thing though too. If you have world history class with me, the information you're going to hear is basically the same. Okay. The questions in the middle parts are the same. However, the warm up is different. Okay. So there's that. And then uh, the exit ticket question, I give you an option of two questions. So if you did one for the world history class, do the other question for this class. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's look at the objectives. We're going to analyze the significance of new and improved land weapons used in World War One. Okay, we're going to examine the importance of new and improved weapons in the air and the sea. Yeah, the air, you heard that right. This is the first time that air weapons are used. We're going to be talking about that. And then we're going to create an argument on whether one country got punished a lot more than other countries. So again, this is your warm-up picture. Now again, like I said, for those of you guys who have world history with me, your warm-up picture is different from this one. Okay, so here's your questions. The first one says, write down, basically analyze the picture, write down three things you see in this picture. Okay, so there's some stuff in the guy's hands, there's the guy himself, and there's something in the background, a particular building. So there you go. So name three of them. Okay. The second question asks, which one would you rather do? Would you rather work? And when I mean work, it's you're working, but you're not getting paid much. Okay, because remember, we're in a war. Okay. And the other one, or fight. So which would you rather do? Would you rather work for little pay, or would you rather fight with the trenches and all that stuff? Which one would you rather do? And why? Why did you choose that one, work or fight? Okay, so pause the video, write your response, but we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so here's the thing. During World War One, there was basically a new system of fighting. The old ways are gone now. Okay, so the picture, like you see up on top, where guys used to line up in the rows and get their guns and put the gunpowder, the bullet, they pack it in. They would get the flintlock put on top, click, boom, shoot. All that old way, the gentleman fighting. Hey, we're out here in the battlefield, standing man to man. That's gone. That's over with. Okay. A new type of fighting was introduced not only on land, but at the sea and now in the air. Okay, because remember at this time, um, the airplane is just barely invented. All right, it's barely invented. It's a brand new concept, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. Okay, but the thing is, there was new inventions that were created, and old inventions were redesigned and created to be better than they were, you know, 10 years, 20, 30 years before. Okay. Now, in World War One total, there was about 9 to 10 million soldiers who died. And about 21 of them, 21 million other ones were wounded. Okay. But here's a kicker. The total number of civilians, people who are not soldiers, the total number of civilians who died is about 10 million. There's just as many civilians who died because of the war than there were soldiers from dying from fighting the war. Now, I'm sure you're probably thinking, well, how did the civilian die? Well, sometimes they get caught in the fighting. Sometimes their neighborhood might be taken over by a particular army, so they're kicked out of their places. They might be traveling the road, and all of a sudden they cut themselves in the middle of fighting. You know, um, There's been times too where the food, they try to get food. The food's limited, because armies are mainly being supplied with this food and stuff like that. So some people died of starvation. And also disease is running rampant. Anytime there's war, chances are there's disease spread around, you know. Here's a little fun, interesting fact, and two. Both countries, France and Germany, the men from the age of about 15 to 49, they sent about 80% of them off to war. So for every five guys who were between the age of 15 to 49, out of every five, four of them were at war. They were soldiers. That one person was more likely back doing stuff, helping out, trying to get money, producing stuff for the soldiers and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So now we talk about the land weapons. So first off, the rifles. The rifles improved so much. Okay, so like I said, back in the day, they used to have the gunpowder, the bullet, pack that in, put the flintlock, boom, boom. Now they had weapons like you see up on top. Basically, a container that contained like five bullets. You put it in, bolt action, right? Click, boom, shoot. Okay, I mean, you could shoot five bullets maybe like 30, 45 seconds easily. Would you hit something? Probably not, but you can sure shoot them. Okay. The thing was that the gun case, the bullets, they had the powder and the primer already in there. So all you had to do was just cock back the hammer and bam, shoot it. And out went the bullet instead of doing it yourself with the powder and the packing and all that stuff. Um, Another thing that happened too was the cavalry. This is something that the old generals still felt really strong about, having the horses. You know, this was a bad thing because again, we talked about the no man's land, but these older generals who were so used in their ways back in the day, they're like, horses can run faster than humans. They can jump farther than humans. So if we have a bunch of guys on these horses, they can just ride through the no man's land and attack the other side. Here's a problem. Yeah, they are faster than humans. They can jump farther, but the distance between no man's land, between trenches to trenches, is huge. And if you remember last week from that video, the machine guns that they had, which we're going to talk about next, actually, they could just mow them down. So millions and millions of horses were killed during World War One. So speaking of machine guns, there was two really heavy machine guns called the Maxim and the Hotchkiss. These things were pretty heavy, okay, but they could do the job. They can really like, mow down an area. Now there was one machine gun called the Lewis gun, which did the same damage as a Maxim, but the difference was it was a lot lighter. So a soldier can easily get it with the help of his partner who fed him the bullets. Um, could easily set something up really quickly in a matter of seconds, and then you know shoot whatever they were shooting at. The next thing was chemical weapons. Now, don't confuse this with biological weapons, okay? Chemical weapons. This is the first time that like deadly gases and poisons are used in war. Okay. Now we're going to talk about two of them coming up right now. Okay. So I'm now going to kill this name, but the first one's called diphosogen. It's a colorless organic compound. The thing is, it's easily condensed in a liquid, but once it's in a gas form, it is very deadly. But the next one we're talking about is way, way worse. Mustard gas. It's a chlorine gas. It's about 2.5 times denser than air. Okay, now the thing is, once it's launched and it's exposed in the air, it gives off this green color. And the way a lot of soldiers said it smelled like was like if you get pineapple juice and you get pepper and you put it together and you mix it and you take a whiff of it, they said that that's how it smells like. You know, well, what it would do was basically once you breathed it in, You took a large breath of it in your lungs. Your lungs would then fill up with water. The water in your body would fill that up. Um, if you were lucky and you survived it, which was rare, um, you would have permanent lung damage. Okay. But majority of the people, they became disabled. They couldn't breathe anymore, and some died because of it. Because again, they cannot breathe. Their body's not getting enough oxygen into their body, and they basically suffocated. Now, the really lucky people, once it was out, and they just got a little hint of it, they didn't get the brunt of the mustard gas. If they just got a little bit of it, they would be coughing. Okay, that's what they had for the rest of their life, constantly coughing. Some guys vomited quite a bit, just everything was coming out. Um, and eye irritation was a big one too. Some people just, it seemed like there was a fog, a constant fog they would see, but it's just the gas affected their eyes. Some guys would have like a kind of like a pinhole vision, just a little spot. That's all they could see. Everything else was just bad or blurry. And some people were completely blind because of mustard gas. Okay. The other big thing that came about was the artillery. Now, the French had a 75 millimeter field gun that could launch things pretty well, but they also had this huge, gigantic machine they called Big Bertha. It was a 400 millimeter that could shoot things that weighed 1,700 pounds. It could launch them 6 miles. These things were massive. So once they were set in the ground, that's where they stayed. It would take basically an entire day or more to disassemble it and transport it to wherever it needed to go, you know. So the enemy was coming over the trench, and they're like, oh, they're coming. They basically destroyed the Big Berthas rather than let the enemy have the time to disassemble it and use it on them. They just destroyed it. Okay. So sometimes you would see things like this after the war was done. These that you see the tree, that thing sticking out. That's one of those projectiles. Some people would try to take them out, and basically they would explode. You know, when they hit the tree, hit the ground, sometimes they didn't detonate. But later on, years after the war, people found these. They found landmines, and people would die because they had no idea. Oh, there's a landmine here that they placed back in World War One, and they never took out the bombs. So what happened? And another new invention was tanks. Now remember, these are not the tanks that we have nowadays. And now tanks nowadays are amazing. They're almost indestructible and stuff like that. But back then, the tanks were used more of as a supportive role. They weren't that great. They broke down. They were hard to maneuver. Okay, because again, brand new, you don't tend to get things right the first time. All right, so here's your first and second question. The first question says, of all the weapons, the land weapons we're talking about, which do you feel had the greatest impact? So which one do you think did the most damage? Could uh, kill a lot of soldiers. Which one do you think was more effective? Okay. The second question says, which one do you feel had the least impact? Which one do you think didn't kill a lot of soldiers? Yeah. And then we're talking about either side. Okay. So which one do you think had the biggest impact as far as casualties, and which one had the littlest effect on casualties? Okay. So pause the video, write your response, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so next comes battleships. Now, there were some warships called dreadnoughts. These things were very large, and they had guns that could really be used for damaging boats. Instead of light machine guns that, they were fast and easy to reload, but they didn't do much damage, whereas these big guns did, but they took longer to reload. However, they improved them later on. And that's what they call the super dreadnoughts. These things were larger, they were faster, and not only did they have those armor-piercing guns, they also had the machine guns. So while the big, armor-piercing guns were being reloaded, they could use the other ones to, hit the people instead of the boat, you know. So that way they can have guns constantly firing, you know, the armor piercing and then the regular bullet ones, and then they could just switch off. Okay. The next big thing was submarines. Now, at that time, nobody made a better submarine than the Germans. The Germans had the U-boats. These things were really, really good. Okay. They designed these U-boats, these submarines, to be an instrument of death. They basically sank 6,394 ships. Now, that includes military ships, cargo ships, passenger ships, and regular civilian ships. Okay. In total, the Germans only lost 229 U-boats. So if you do the math, basically for one submarine, they sunk down 30 ships. That's a pretty good average for them. So those U-boats did their job. Now, the thing is, a lot of people were like, well, how do you destroy a submarine, especially back then? Well, they had this thing called depth charges, and if you see on the picture on the bottom, that's what those white circles you see on the water is. There's canisters with explosives, and basically what they would do is get this kind of like a little wheel. They would put on top, and they would click it, click it, click it, click it. That's how deep they would have the barrels go down into the water, and then once they reach that certain depth, then they would explode. Now the thing is, these submarines, yeah, they're effective, they're fast, but the thing is, if they took on too much hits, a tear would go through, and then just water would be pumping in, and that's something you cannot stop, especially in a submarine. You know, that water's coming in full force, and you can't just like push against it and seal it up. No, that's tons and tons of pressure of water coming in. Okay, so that's what they used to destroy these U-boats. Now in the air, again, new invention, and these generals and people are like, how do we use this for war? And they decided, let's mount a machine gun on there. The best pilots were known as aces. All right, they were known as the knights of the sky. There is one guy, especially in World War One, who was like the ace of all aces. He is famously known as the Red Baron. That's him up on top there, that picture. Um, the British called him the Red Knight. The French called him the Red Devil. Okay, but his real name, and I know I'm probably going to kill his last name, is Manfred von Richthofen. Okay, he has a confirmed 80 kills. Now, that's really impressive. Okay, his squadron was known as the Flying Circus. Okay, so that's a picture of him up on top, and that's the bottom picture is a replica of his plane. Okay, as you can see, it's a simple propeller. It's not a jet or anything like that. Those things are not maneuvering that well, but somehow, some way, he was so good in the air, he killed 80 people. The other type of ships they used at the time were Zeppelins. Now, Zeppelins are basically like blimps. So if you ever watch the football game, you see the Goodyear blimp. Those are basically like Zeppelins. They were used for long-range bombing missions. Okay, now the thing that made them special was that the airplanes like these here, they could go down here. Zeppelins could get way up here, way into the air, more than planes could. Okay, and the thing is, these blimps were filled with hydrogen, which is lighter than air, so they floated up higher. And the thing that maintained the shape, I mean, was that they were enforced with steel frames. So that's why they maintained the shape, and they were able to go places, and maneuver instead of just being like a balloon just going up wondrously. Okay, but the thing is too with them, they can go pretty fast. They can get up to 85 miles per hour carrying about 2 tons worth of bombs. So they had to do just float, float, float to a certain area and then just release. And there you go. People wouldn't know until it was already too late. Now, here's your next question. Which way would you rather fight, in the air or in the sea? So, knowing about the depth charges, these U boats, the planes, the Zeppelins, stuff like that, if you were there in World War One, they were telling you basically you're going to have to fight one way or the other in the air or in the sea. Which one would you choose and why? Why did you choose that one over the other one? Okay, so pause the video, think about it, really think about it. Which way would you rather fight? And think about your craft, whether it's airplane or battleship. What if it got destroyed? So think about that too. Okay, so uh, again, pause the video, write down what you think. Well, we're moving on in three, two, one. So April 1915, the Second Battle of Ypres. This is the first time that poison is used in war. I believe it was mustard gas that was used. And what happened was, again, just like I told you what mustard gas did, that's what happened. People didn't know what was going on. They just saw this green gas coming through and they're like, what's this? And all of a sudden, people started vomiting. People started losing their sight. They couldn't see. And they're just like, I'm blind. Oh my God, what happened? And some people, again, uh, the the gas basically closed up their airway and they basically suffocated to death. So after that, like this picture shows, gas masks became a necessary tool for soldiers. Okay, even to this day, if you know anybody who's been in the military, who's been through the training and stuff like that, they'll tell you that putting on your gas mask and they put you in this chamber, they tell you you got like 10 seconds to put on this gas mask, 30 seconds. You got to put that on, or else you're gonna, be like teary eyed and choking and this and that. You know, it's become a standard issue now because of that. 1916 tanks were used. Again, they were very slow, they weren't very reliable, and they were easy to destroy. But again, like I said, you typically don't get things right the first time around. Okay, so as time goes on, when we get to World War II, and hopefully we can get to the later on stuff, you'll see how the tanks have improved over time. Now, here's a little fun, interesting fact. No American troop ships, the ships carrying the troops from America to Europe, none of them were destroyed. None of them were sunk by the German U-boats. Okay. However, things started getting really bad in Russia in March 1917. Riots started breaking out. The people were very upset with the government, not only how they were um, conducting the war, but that Russia was running out of food and fuel. And they're looking at like, what are we getting out of this? So some Russians were having a change of heart. So this guy right here, Vladimir Lenin, excuse me, he's a leader of the Bolshevik Party. Basically, they overthrew the Russian government and established a communist government. Now, the first thing he did as the Russian leader, he said, we're getting out of this war. Okay, so March 3rd, 1918, they signed a treaty in Germany. Okay, they're basically saying we're out of this. We're done. We don't want no more part of this war. We're not going to attack you anymore. We're basically surrendering. Um, Under the treaty, they lost a lot of territory. They lost land in the Ukraine, Finland, Polish, and the Baltic territory area. So they lost quite a bit. Um, Now with Russia no longer their focus, now they don't have to look over here anymore. They could focus all their attention over here towards Europe, towards France, Britain, America, and that's what they did. But here's the problem. The United States, Britain, France, they're giving it their all and they're attacking. So what happens is on July 15th, 1918, the Germans decide, you know what, we're going to give one last hoorah, one last push. So they attack at the Second Battle of Marne. They are pushing hard. They're being aggressive, and they think that they can punch a hole through the trenches and make their way through to the side, and then you maybe get the French and Americans to back up. But that didn't happen. In fact, quite the opposite happened. They didn't even make a budge, not even budge a little. And they basically went back like, oh man, we can't do that again. Geez. So while they're licking their wounds, the French and Americans are like, oh, they're hurt. They're hurt. You know what? Let's go and attack them. So they do a counterattack, and the Germans are like just barely getting over their attack. And it's like, now they're coming. Oh man! And they try to defend, but they can't, and they end up getting pushed back. So while they keep getting pushed back, back, and back, and back, um, the end is in sight. So President Wilson of the United States calls for a plan for 14 points. And one of those points is creating this thing called the League of Nations, in which the League would basically try to help maintain peace and prevent any more future wars from happening by basically saying that all these countries pledge to respect and protect each other's territory and political independence. So hey, you're free. Do what you do. Yeah, don't you if someone tries to take over your territory, we'll help you out, you know, type of thing. October 1918, the Ottoman Empire signs a treaty with the Allies. They're like, we can't fight anymore, we're done. They toss in the towel. They're done. November 4th, Austria-Hungary, the country that basically started the war, who wanted uh, revenge on Serbia, they call for armistice, which is basically a truce. They're like, hey, we're not going to attack you if you don't attack us, okay? So they're kind of quitting in a sense. Germany is looking at Austria-Hungary going, really? Really? You asked for our help in this war and you're basically giving up. Come on, seriously? What happened to the big old tough Austria-Hungary? Oh, man. So about a week later, Germany is basically forced to take an armistice. They don't want to take it, but they're kind of forced to because they're getting their butts kicked. So they're the last country to quote unquote surrender. So the Paris Peace Conference comes up. The Allied leaders state their desire to build a post-war world where they can stop future conflicts. Okay, the war to end all wars. This is how we stop it. This is how we stop all wars. We basically make sure this never happens again. June 28th, 1919. The Treaty of Versailles is signed. But basically, what it says in there is that Germany is stripped of their armed forces, so they can't have an army no more. They have to pay reparations. Sorry about that. Basically means they have to pay for everything. All the weapons, the guns and stuff like that used in war, the damages that was caused, um, for everyone. They have to pay it. And on top of that, they have to acknowledge, basically say to the world that the war started because of them, and everything that happened, the deaths, the destruction, all of it was their fault. Now, remember I told you France wanted revenge on Germany, well, Prussia, after what happened to them. You could say they got their revenge now, you know. So when it came to the League of Nations, three countries basically wanted to sign up right away: Belgium, France, Russia. They joined the League of Nations. They're like, okay, United States, your turn to sign. Here you go. The United States does not sign. The one country that says we should do this is the only country that does not sign. So here's the thing. Do you believe that the United States should have joined the League of Nations? Because here's the thing. The reason why they didn't join was a lot of the American people were like, this League of Nations would force us to join in the war if something happened over there. That's their problem. Let them deal with that. But President Wilson and there were some other people who felt, no, 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 no. See, if the whole world's at war, what makes you think that's not going to come over here? So there's some people looking at the future and then some people looking at now. So my question to you is this. Should the United States have joined the League of Nations? Why or why not? Okay, so pause the video, write your response. Then we're moving on to the exit ticket in 3, 2, 1. All right. So, like I told you guys, for those of you guys who have me for both world history and U.S. history, whichever question you did for world history, do the other one. And if this is the first video you're watching, pick one. But then for the other world history class, do the other one. Okay. You should not be doing the both, uh, one question 2 times. Okay. So the first question says, why do you think Germany got such a bad and large punishment, even though they didn't start the war? They didn't start it. It was basically Austria-Hungary and Serbia. They got pulled into it. They were told, hey, remember, the Emperor of Austria-Hungary was saying, hey, you were buddies with Archduke Ferdinand. Let's get these guys. They were pulled into it. But why would they suffer more? Okay. The second one says, with the war mainly fought in Europe, what do you think the European countries are going to be doing for the next 10 years? And then what do you think the US is going to be doing for the next 10 years? So give a little prediction. What do you think is happening? Remember, in the United States, there was no battles happening. No trenches were dug in and stuff like that in the United States. So what do you think is going to happen for them for the next 10 years as opposed to France, Germany, Russia, where all these battles were happening? What do you think's going to happen for them for the next 10 years? Okay, excuse me. So once you are done with this, with your exit ticket, you're done for the class. All right. So good job. Um, we are going to be talking later on about the Roaring Twenties for a little bit, and then we're going to be getting into the Great Depression and all that stuff. Okay. So be prepared for that. Okay. So you guys have a good day. Take care. You be safe. All right.